When the creators of The Simpsons were putting together what has now become the longest running animated TV show in history, they wanted to describe each character in one phrase. For the character of Bart Simpson, they wrote, underachiever and proud of it. Now, if you're familiar with the show, you know that over the years, Bart has grown and changed over 28 seasons, but he's still an underachiever and still proud of it. In school, at home, at church, or in any endeavor, he does only what's necessary to get by. He said on one occasion, I can't promise to try, but I'll try to try. Of course, Bart couldn't help but be an underachiever because of his dad, Homer. It's tough to become valedictorian of your class if your father regales you with sage advice like, trying is the first step to failure. I thought about Bart when I came across some thoughts from Ken Wood. Wood says that for many people, God is an underachiever. God promises a lot, but doesn't always deliver. If the test my doctor ordered come back positive, God must not have been listening to my prayers. If my kid calls from the police station, again, God must have been asleep at the wheel. If I lose my job, God must have jumped on the first bus out of town. If my marriage falls apart, God must be taking the day off. God looks like an underachiever, and who can trust a God like that? What is there to be grateful for? Heard about a rancher who sent one of his cowboy employees out to survey the damage a severe drought had inflicted upon the landscape, and he came back and said, "Boss, it looks bad. I didn't see enough grass out there to build a bird's nest. The water's dried up. There's dead cattle everywhere. If it don't rain pretty soon, I don't know what we'll do." Well, the rancher was a devout man, and so he said, "Well, I guess the Lord will send us rain when we need it bad enough." And the cowboy complained, "Well, if the Lord don't know we need rain now, he's a pretty poor cowman." God's an underachiever, you see. You just can't count on a deity like that. And then there was the woman who went to church and heard the words of Jesus in Matthew 17. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. She immediately thought of the large hill across from her house that obscured her view of sunsets and beautiful wildlife. So she went home and prayed fervently on her knees throughout the night for that hill across from her house to be moved. And early the next morning, she hurried to the front door to see the results of her faith, and the hill was right where it had always been. She slammed the door in disgust and said, "Just as I expected." God's an underachiever, you see. If God can't be trusted to give me what I want, or worse, if God can't be trusted to give me what I need, then why should I trust Him? Why should I give thanks? What good is God to me or to anybody for that matter? Now, most of us sitting here this morning know that's not the way it works, don't we? Don't we? If we're honest enough with ourselves and with God, we have to admit there's at least a little bit of that sentiment residing still in our hearts. I know it's still lurking about in mine. There are times when God feels like an underachiever, like the Almighty's off taking a nap. Why am I bald and that guy has a full head of hair? Why do I struggle with my weight while he eats like a truck driver and never gains a pound? Why is his son in medical school while mine's still living in the basement playing video games? Why is his career thriving while I'm struggling to make ends meet? Why does she have 3 children and I'm still rocking an empty cradle? Why does she still have a husband around the house while I have to go visit mine in the cemetery? Why does God answer those prayers and not mine? When faith is a quid pro quo, God will always look like an underachiever. If the 23rd Psalm consisted only of verses 1, 2, 3, and 6, then I could look at my life and say, so where are the green pastures for me, God? Where are the still waters in my life? When are you going to restore my soul? But then the psalmist says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You mean God doesn't desert me even in the darkest places of my life? When my health fails, when my business collapses, when my family disintegrates, you mean God is still with me? If God is a fair weather God, then God is an underachiever. But if God journeys with us, never abandoning us, never giving up on us, always encouraging us, always guiding us, even in the midst of life's most painful moments, then the psalmist's description of God is a pretty good one. The Lord is my shepherd. A little boy was eagerly looking forward to his best friend's birthday party. But on the big day, the town was hit by a blizzard that made the roads and the sidewalks virtually impassable. The boy's dad said, son, I can't even get the car out of the garage. I'm afraid you can't go to the party. His son said, but Dad, the house isn't that far away. I could walk. But with the storm, son, oh, I'll be careful. All the other kids will be there. Please, please. Finally, the dad relented and said, yeah, you can go. The boy shouted, yippee, and he bundled himself up in his heaviest winter garb, and he plunged out into the raging storm. The wind was bending trees over. The snow was blowing sideways. Visibility was almost impossible. It took the boy nearly an hour to trudge just a few blocks. But finally he got there, and he rang the doorbell, and as he was waiting for the door to open, his peripheral vision caught a glimpse of a moving shadow. He turned to look, and he saw a figure retreating into the storm. It was his father. His dad had followed him every step of the way to make sure he arrived safely. Even though I trudged through the worst snowstorm, even though I arrive at divorce court, even though I file bankruptcy papers, even though my child breaks my heart, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you, my shepherd, are with me. Your presence, your unconditional love comforts me. Even in the presence of my enemies, like an unreasonable boss or a two-faced friend or an unfaithful spouse, you prepare a table before me and my cup overflows. Now, if you believe in a God who scratches your back as long as you scratch his, then God is an underachiever. But if you believe in a God who walks with you, even when life crashes in, then God is your shepherd. It's like Harry Emerson Fosdick said to the woman who announced she no longer believed in God. And Fosdick said, well, tell me which God you don't believe in. Chances are I don't believe in him either. Now, when Jesus wanted to describe discipleship, he used the same image found in Psalm 23. He likened himself to a shepherd and to his followers as sheep. But he added a twist. The relationship, he said, is dependent upon the sheep recognizing the shepherd's voice. Now, everybody in the agricultural society of Jesus' day knew how sheep come to know the voice of their shepherd and learn to trust him. Jesus said when he has brought out all his own sheep, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. The voice of a thief, however, would be totally unfamiliar to them. Following the thief's voice could get them into big trouble. So I wonder if we don't often see God as an underachiever because we aren't close enough to recognize God's voice. Maybe God is speaking, but we aren't listening. Or we aren't listening close enough to realize who is speaking. It's like the man who couldn't find a job, and he complained to his wife one day, I begged and I begged God to speak to me and to help me. Why doesn't God answer? And his wife, sitting clear across the room, said something he couldn't understand. What'd you say? So she repeated her words. He said, I still can't hear you. So he walked across the room a little bit. He still couldn't hear her. What did you say? And so he finally walked clear across the room and leaned in close enough to where he was practically sitting on his wife's chair, and he heard her say, sometimes God whispers. So we have to move closer to hear. Getting close enough to hear the shepherd's voice is the key to the whole scenario. Only then can you or I learn to recognize God's voice when we walk through that darkest valley. Only then can we fear no evil. Only then can we see a table spread out in the presence of our enemies. When we learn to recognize God's voice, God doesn't look like an underachiever anymore. Some of you may remember the story. It was printed in Woman's Day magazine about a lady by the name of Karen who said to her 3-year-old son one day, Michael, guess what? You're going to have a baby sister, and we're going to name her Marlee. Well, Michael was ecstatic. And as the pregnancy progressed, he got even more excited. And every time Karen sat down or tucked her son in at night, Michael would sing to his baby sister, Marlee, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. He warbled that to his sister in his mommy's tummy over and over, every chance he got. Well, finally the day came and Marlee was born. But the doctors knew immediately there was something wrong, seriously wrong. They whisked her away by ambulance to the neonatal intensive care unit at St. Mary's Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee. She got worse. The pediatric specialist told Karen and her husband, we're trying everything we can, but I have to tell you to be prepared for the worst. So they contacted a local cemetery about a burial plot. They made preliminary plans for a funeral. And during the whole ordeal, every day, Michael begged to see Marlee. I want to sing to her, he said. His parents kept putting him off. They didn't want him to see his sister hooked up to scary machines with tubes protruding from her body like octopus tentacles. But as the prognosis grew more and more grim, they realized Michael might miss seeing her altogether if they procrastinated any longer. And finally, when it looked like Marlee wouldn't live out the week, Karen took Michael to the hospital. She loaded him into a scrub suit about 10 sizes too big, led him to the ICU, and lifted him up to the bedside to see his infant sister slowly losing her battle to live. And Michael sang, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. Well, just then the heart monitor, which had been recording an erratic and weakening heartbeat, began beeping, a calm and steady pulse. Karen noticed it and whispered, keep on singing, Michael. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Marlene's ragged, strained breathing grew as smooth as a kitten's purr. The nurses gathered in the doorway. They said, keep on singing, Michael. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. Marlee relaxed. Rest, sweet, healing rest swept over her. The nurses hugged each other. Tears streamed down the face of the head nurse. Karen glowed. "Keep on singing, Michael. Please don't take my sunshine away." They scrapped the funeral plans. And the next day, the very next day, the doctor said Marlee was well enough to go home. She had recognized her brother's voice as he sang. And she made it through to the other side of the darkest valley. Do you recognize the voice of your brother, Jesus? Well, as we say at the beginning of every worship service, are you listening?